Hi everybody, welcome to another video on the channel. This is the first video I've put out since the New York Times interviewed me and put me as part of an article about beginning rowing. And so for those of you that have subscribed as a result of that link, welcome to the channel. So a lot of you have subscribed in the last couple of weeks. So today what I'm going to talk about is a few things that didn't quite make the article, which may be a little bit more advanced in terms of how you row. But what I want to do, I'm on a Row Perfect right now, so this could work on most machines. The general principle that I'm going to talk about is how to generate acceleration and force as you row. So this is less about the mechanics, even though that's embedded into this in terms of, you know, using the sequence in which you use your body, and a little bit more in terms of like how do I generate power, how do I generate acceleration and something like that. And so what I've got here is I got an app that works with this Row Perfect. This is actually sort of the light version of this software. And what it does is it generates a force curve every stroke. And so if I take a few strokes now, you're going to see it like drawing some force curves. And what the force curve is it's sort of derived on this machine, and it's a curve you get one per stroke. At the beginning of the curve is the beginning of the stroke, the catch. When I start to use my legs and engage the wheel, you're going to see the beginning of the curve, and then at the end of the stroke, at the release, is the final end of that stroke, right? So basically what it's going to do is it's going to try to figure out what the force is on the handle. So on the y-axis is force, and on the x-axis is the distance. On this machine, it's distance. On the Concept 2, it's time. So this is actually displacement here on the x-axis on this particular device. What I also have is other metrics about peak force and things like that. So one of the things that I think is really, really important is really this idea of like, what should we be trying to do during the drive to generate force. So what I want to talk about today is you want to think of the rowing stroke in a similar way that a javelin thrower would think of throwing a javelin. So for example, if you look at a javelin throw, I'm going to go ahead and turn on an image here so you can see this. But if I turn that on and looking at, so this is the Australian National Archives, so thank the Austrian National Archives, so thanks to them for this picture. But if you look at that picture, the way that javelin thrower is engaged, their whole body is engaged. Sure, there's a sequence, but I think of this as sort of like an organic whole engagement of the body, and obviously a sequencing of what you're doing with force production. The most important point of that javelin throw has to be how much momentum does the javelin have at the point of the release. So I want you to think about that in terms of how much momentum, how much impulse have you transferred, what is essentially the speed of the wheel in this machine or the speed of your boat at the end of that acceleration phase. So at the release of the stroke, at the end of the stroke. So it's not that any one particular point on the curve or the force curve is important. It's more like a continuum to that point. So they're all important points. So, you know, as I'm taking strokes here, you know, we're thinking about where am I at the end of that force curve in terms of how much speed do I have in this wheel. So the way that I talk about this with my clients is let's think of ourselves as throwing that object away every stroke. In the same way that in a boat, we want to be pushing the boat down. We want to be not throwing our puddles because that would be inefficient, but pushing our puddles away as far as we can. So that's really sort of part of the concept here. So I'm going to get on this machine. I'm going to turn this picture off here just for a sec So I get a little bit, you can get a little bit more room here to kind of watch this. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a few things in terms of force application, in terms of just getting force on the handle. So, clearly it's, we initialize with the legs, and then we're using the body and the arms through as we accelerate that wheel. And it's really an organic whole, and not that legs, then the body, and then the arms. Really, you're working together. So biomechanically speaking, if you ask a biomechanic qualified person, they're going to say, we want to push the machine away until my shins and my upper leg are at 90 degrees, and then I'm going to work my upper body against my legs and try and finish everything through acceleration. So if I'm accelerating this machine and I'm really emphasizing the front end of the catch, which is important, and then don't accelerate through, I'm going to get a force curve that kind of trails off a little bit, right? If I'm not effective on the front end, but then I get better as I go through, then I get a late peak in that stroke. So I'll just put my glasses on here so I can read that. But you can see that the relative peak is 58% of the way through the stroke, and the peak force, wasn't particularly high. So what are we aiming to do here is to try to create a curve that's a haystack. We're trying to create a curve, and depending on sort of what you're trying to achieve in the boat, a position of peak force, really ideally a little bit before 50%, or if you're trying to row the perfect parabola, it sort of depends on the boat type. So what I'm going to try and do here is row a few strokes and try and get this curve to be as haystack and as convex as possible. So what I'm trying to do there, every single stroke, is really think about accelerating and using my body weight effectively to accelerate that handle. If I really try and hit the front end with everything, I'm not going to leave myself stuff. I'm not going to leave myself some energy to finish off that stroke. And as you can see from that force curve, it's pretty smooth on the way up, and then it goes kind of straight. And nobody ever said I was going to row a perfect force curve. But what I'm looking to try to do is continue that acceleration. So I want you to think a little bit about throwing that javelin and accelerating, and really thinking about, where am I when I'm here at the end of that continuum? Like, no one point is more important than the other. It's the organic whole. But I want to be making sure that I'm, accelerating that handle, or basically pushing the puddle away as far as possible, so that the run on the boat is maximized between the strokes, and the wheel speed is maximized at the end of the stroke. So, if I'm soft on that front end, I'm going to get something like this. And then what I'm trying to do is think about that organic hull. So I'm starting by pushing the machine away, making sure I lift a little bit of weight off the seat, and then I want to make sure that I'm not trying to open the body too early in the drive, so that I can use my body weight through the center of the drive and really whip the handle through to the end of the stroke. And you can see what that does to that force curve. So, that's okay connection at the beginning, you know, I'm getting a peak force before 50%. But if I think of myself like a javelin thrower and I'm accelerating through, and at that point, at the end of the release, I'm releasing that javelin. It's just one way to think about acceleration in a way that maybe not obvious when you're thinking about it. So I'm going to row a few more strokes here and see what I can do. But I want you to start thinking about this, you know, as you're rowing along, so that you can create connection and power and acceleration. And here we go. Push, accelerate. Push, accelerate. Push, accelerate. Push, accelerate. Push, accelerate. Push, accelerate. Whipping the body through. So you can see there, you know, I got a little bit of work to do towards the end of that stroke, but I am getting some nice acceleration. And you know, I wanted to put this video out because, you know, we talk about, you know, movement and coordination, but it's also about activation and what it should feel like when we're picking up the front end and accelerating through, what that force curve does in order for us to, you know, really get that acceleration on. So I encourage you, think about yourself like a javelin thrower or a shot put thrower. You know, watch those videos on YouTube. There's a ton. Just slow it down, frame by frame, and look how they use their whole body organically in order to, and there's a sequence to it, sure, but think about that engagement. Think about, you know, pushing the puddles away, sending that boat, getting the most amount of boat speed at the end of that stroke. All of these points up here are important, and please don't misunderstand me. It's not like you just save your power for the second half of the stroke. That's not going to work. You've got to connect on the front end, a little bit of patience at the front end, and then it's boom, and it should be a surge all the way through that stroke in order for you to get that really optimal force curve that kind of looks haystacky and doesn't bend in on itself. Every time it bends in on itself, you know there's a clue there that you're losing a little bit of connection. So I hope you've enjoyed the video. Welcome to the channel again. If you've been on the channel subscriber for a couple of weeks. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe and like the video. Please share my content. It would mean a great deal to me. I'm here to work with you if you need a bit more coaching. I run custom-made programs for my clients all over the world. I do one-on-one real-time sessions live. I have training plans on ErgZone for you know, 2K, 5K, aerobic building, and even a learn to row program if that's where you are learning to row. And I'll link to all of that in the comments, including my website. There's a ton of resources on my website. I hope you've enjoyed the video. I hope that the javelin analogy gives you a target to aim for as you're learning to row, but also learning to apply acceleration and power and force on that handle. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next video. Take care now.